School of the Orixas. EKORISA Afro-Scientific Pedagogy and Education. I love the Africa of my ancestrals and I'm proud to be Black 21st Century African Renaissance. Work carried out in compliance with Law 10,639/03, Afro-Brazilian and African Culture in Education. Ivan Poly OSUNFEM by ELEDUIBON. Pedagogy of the Orixas EKORIA Ivan D. A. Silva Poly OSUNFEM by ELEDUIBON. I dedicate this work to my late spiritual brother Ogun D. Yelabitong, who was in Brazil between February and May 2015, my brother from the diaspora who initiated me in the study of the cult of Ifa in his quality as a Babalawo and son of the orbit of Osogbo in Nigeria. Spiritual leader, head of the Balabolka Yelabitong, my dad spiritual. I dedicate it his constructions also at leaders traditional of rebirth African, as my dad Ifeanyi Yelabitong and Prince Serge Guzo, heir to the throne of Dahomey, who recognize me, so like mine work, like member and part of this rebirth. I cannot fail to mention in this dedication my thanks to Mother Stella Diaco Ko, Maria Stella in Azevedo Saints, 1925 to 2018, so as at your precursors matriarchs of the LHAX Opio Fond, Oba B. Mayanandha, Eugenia Anna dos Santos, 1869 to 1938, Hoxam New and Mother Senora, Maria Babayana. Do Eshrito Santa, 1890 to 1967, and Edwintona Mother Mies Inha, Andina Valeria Pigmental, 1916 to 1975, all with their histories of true heroines in the defense of our traditional communities of African origin, as well as the values civilizing what our nation inherited from these traditions. Summary. Evocation to the spirits of African and Brazilian lands. Presentation. Reflections theoretical and Bourdieu the Charlotte, reflecting about the sociology gives reproduction in Winnicott the Bearns, phenomena, space transitional and space in creation as methodologies. Pedagogical defense of teaching Afro-Brazilian and African history and culture. Teaching in story and culture Afro-Brazilian and African, bases. Cool defense of study from myths. Africans at the context. Educational Brazilian visions. African at education. History, archetypes, myths and facts. Philosophy. Zango he came before in Russo sociology. The sociologist exudes psychology. Diane got mad. Freud in your diva. Applications, workshops and pedagogical practices of Afro-descendant identity. Affirmation, depositions, considerations, finals, references. Evocation to the spirits. Das Land African bis Brazilian. The ship slaver was a dream. Dantesque. Go poop in blood to if bathe. Clink of irons. Crack of whips. Legions in men blacks as the night. Horrendous dancing. Who are these bastards? Are the warriors bold? Yesterday simple, strong, brave. Today miserable slaves, without light, without air, without reason. Or unhappy women. How thirsty, broken, in far. Well, far away he comes. Sir God from bastards. You told me, Sir God, if I'm delirious. Or if it's true so much horror towards you heavens. There is one people what the flag borrow for to cover so much infamy and cowardice. Or rivered flag of my land, that the Brazilian breeze kisses and sways, before you had broken in battle, what serve the a people shroud? But it is infamy too much. Gives ethereal plague a rise, heroes of the new world. Castro Alves, 1884. With the spirit of an anthropophagic Paulistano who, like Caetano Veloso 1978 in Sampa, sees Sao Paulo as Pan-Americas of utopian Africas. Zumi, I thank my African ancestors for all the struggle to form our nation, despite all suffering and no recognition, and through a fragment of poem O ship slaver, I evoke in spirit by the values civilizing what we inherit at the Brazil of civilizations African. Even so many years after the publication of the Black Ship, it remains current. I remember that recent numbers of the genocide of black youth on 2022 show that our flag is still serves a people in a shroud, as the poem says, because every young black man killed today in our country has like shroud the flag in a country what still you deny opportunities. But we could not carry out the work of the African Renaissance and the encounter with the Latin American Renaissance without saluting the land that sheltered and welcomed these ancestors and turned in your homeland and in their descendants. Per that, ours ancestors Africans thank you to spirit of this earth. And as my African ancestors would do, I evoke a spirit of this land, from the poem An Indian, remembering that, In our Latin American Renaissance, traditional values Africans if find with you of communities traditional in all the America Latin. I see in that poem the harbinger of all the glory that will bring cultural renaissance to our peoples, remembering that this Indian in what speaks the song we are all of us Brazilians. One Indian will descend from a bright, colorful star. What will come in a dizzying speed and will land at the heart of Hemisphere South? Will come undaunted Nat nor Muhammad there. Passionately like Perry Calm and unerring like Bruce Lee. And the things I know he will say, do no say so in explicit way. And that one what in that time if will reveal to peoples will surprise thee all not for being exotic but for fact in power to have ever stayed hidden when will you have been the obvious. Cortano Fleece, 1977. Thus, I make this work an evocation of the spirits of the ancestors of all those who fight for black cause, for the Latin American and African Renaissance in the diaspora so that those who militate for these causes, as Castro Alves said, from the ethereal scourge rise, heroes of the new mundo in order to carry out the necessary transformations so that our flags stop serving the a people of shroud. Presentation. I grew up in an Afro-descendant family that faced all the difficulties of being black in a racist society, preserving the pride and customs of their roots, even when disguised under a cloak of European culture. In this context, I also witnessed the struggle of people who dedicated themselves to political militancy against social inequalities. These experiences made me feel proud of my Afro-descendants and their civilizing values, and made me sensitive to the need to face the elements of African cultures as an essential part of our Brazilian culture. And my life experience has shown the urgency of actions capable of break the resistance of society dominant the wild heritage African. At one point in my life, I worked at a place where I had two co-workers at same function. During breaks and when the bosses were not present, I talked a lot with the two on the most varied subjects. Both had completed higher education, one level culture very high by the average we have in our country, in which, in the second decade of the XXI, still only one minority gives population he arrives to level university IDGE, 2017. One was trained in tourism, spoke 3 languages and had lived in Europe for several years. The another, which I will call K, was a unique example of what we can consider an excellent cultural formation. At the age of 25, graduated in German language arts, K, like most of the students at Faculty of Philosophy, Letters and Human Sciences at USP where she had studied, she was not black, belonged to the middle class of Sao Paulo and came from studies mostly in private schools, in grade level and tuition phases. For your formation, K knew all the literature German and you knew to analyze deeply works as Faulstinger and all at school's literary Germans. He knew all the philosophers of the Berlin School. He knew how to argue from Kant to Nietzsche, from whom had excellent references, and knew the larger part of analysis literary in all U classics of which at USP is called universal literature from the North and above all European. Let's say from Ticket. Although a student of German, Kate was not satisfied with only that language, but also had full training, with certificates, in English, Spanish languages that I had already taught together with German and French at the maximum level of recognition of the French legal institution itself who does it in Brazil and understood perfectly, at a grammatical and reading level, Catalan and Italian. He had international experience. He exchanged in Germany, Italy, Argentina, Ireland and Australia, and he knew all of Europe from the many times he was there, commented widely knowledge of Irish authors such as James Joyce, Oscar Wilde and others lesser known, result in your exchange in Ireland. She was interested in the arts in general and was, when I met her, enrolled in a highly regarded course in theatrical direction and acting, developing relevant works for his training level. Thus, in addition to Brett and the Groschi opera the threepenny opera, that inspired Chico Buarque de Hollanda's Opera do Malandro which he had known since studied literature at USP, had a deep knowledge of Chekhov, Stanislavski and all the school's American behaviorists who influenced the world. Theater. Once, when I spoke of Brecht's influence on the Trickster's opera, she told me that the classical tragedy of the Argonauts Maciel, 2004 influenced the play Gata de Grave Accent Agua by the same author and told me about several authors gives theory theatrical that influenced construction by Chico Buarque through from times. Well, I was in front of the typical representative of the cultural elite that the University of Sao Paulo has formed since Levi Strauss 1957. page 101106 made his first observations about the profile from students gives USP, when they're taught sociology in between 1935 and 1939. Not to mention that I had no references about African and Brazilian culture in general. I can say that, during the preparatory studies, Kate must have read all the authors indicated for the entrance exams, including those from the nationalist modernist phase, such as Jorge Amado and Guimarães Rosa. And in 2013, when I learned from the Brazilian mainstream media often associated with South American companies African women who participated in and benefited from apartheid that Nelson Mandela had died, was sad and said, at the time, that he had participated in a lecture by a Senegalese researcher who spoke about the griots and the literature oral of that Africa region. However, on one occasion, when I said that my mother made a courageous for a answer on Santa Barbara, when we lived in Bahia, and who dedicated his own business to our answer, Katie asked, who it is I answer. Note what is it over there could have asked also, who it is Santa Barbara, or, oh what is shrimp bean ball, but did not ask. On another occasion, when our co-worker said he had been to Nigeria and had attended the royal party, and I said that I intended to go to Africa to make my saint and my oryx in the temple of Oxum, Kate startled, asked, oh what is to do the holy, oh what it is oryx, who it is Oxum. For to complete painting, when we were talking, in other occasion, about boy work and the admiration he caused her and all the students in her drama course, and I commented that his daughter had married Carlin Hose Brown, before I said that his family had ancestry of families. Gives nobility African Yoruba as the mic, Kate commented. Wow, Carlin Hose Brown, what a character. Her father her idol, Chico Buarque, who has blue eyes like the Germans and Dutch people she is so attracted to must have been very sad and angry with it over there. Clear what in other time, talking about racism, in due course, saw what Kay admitted there is racism in Brazil, as did 94% of respondents in a 2000 survey Oliveira, Barreto, 2003. However, just like 87.5% of the subjects of this research, Kay is not considered racist. In other discussion, at which I defended quotas at USP and talked about a process established at FCPPIR against my college per racism institutional, she argued, I am against quotas, because I believe in meritocracy. Everyone has to make an effort to achieve to arrive there. Like this as I arrived, one could to read in your speaks implicitly. In these cases, all, I ask, believe in what it is evaluated this one merit. Whereas what factors? Seeing clearly that a representative of our cultural elite still passes through the processes that guarantee the advent of cultural diversity in the pedagogical environment of our environment school, I ask these questions. What merit? The merit of studying one's own culture from the old cultural handling with habitus, which for others becomes a cultural imposition, with the in order to promote the reproduction of cultural relationships that benefit you and your group social. This example, which is recurrent in our university elite, makes clear the awareness of class as a participant in the Brazilian economic and cultural elite, which fears otherness. Creating this fragmentation social from perpetuation gives reproduction of relations social excluding. Within the scope of this example, how is the question of believing that the other, like us, has potential that we can take advantage of, just as he can take advantage of ours proposed by the French educator Jean Bierns 2007, page 43, our translation. We must ask this question, because the fact of not believing in this other, and simply ignoring him institutionally, makes the relationships cultural in force be reproduced and what while education serve only this one purpose, most that we embrace progressive political positions in our speeches. If we do not consider this discourse the cultural bias and the variance that this bias brings, we will fall into pessimism and determinism sociological so criticized by the authors what will be analyzed further forward. Without considering alterity, without giving space in Brazilian education to what is still called alterity in our academic thinking, we will hardly reverse this picture of reproduction of cultural relations. And our speech, even apparently progressive, will be mere ideological catechism without praxis, because our education will continue to work to reproduce the relations cultural founded in relations in domination. This perception led me to the study of different cultures and traditions, in search of ways to fight against the exclusion of such an important part of the culture and civilizing values in our country. In 1997, I did the internship in Note at Foundation Ramakrishna, in Hyderabad, at India Akademia Math, 2022 when I was there carrying out studies on Big Data and culture and visiting their educational institutions 2012. I was able to verify, in general, that this institution affirms the Indian culture and identity among its members and with regard to the appropriation of language. The most important thing I noticed was the methodology of Center in Languages Foreign, what it located aside of Temple in Big Data. In Hyderabad, the predominant language is Telugu, and in India, to have access to the production-dominant cultural and cult pattern, it is necessary to master both the language of the province in question. As for English, the most interesting thing I could observe was that, in the case of the Fundikato Ramakrishna, the objective was, from the reaffirmation of Indian culture and identity, to promote the mastery of the cultured standard of English, without trying to Brittanize or Americanize the students, as we see it recurrently in methodologies of language schools in Brazil. What I could observe in Hyderabad, it even brought to my memory the song by Arnaldo Antunes' 1991 Volta para o Your Home, when it says, "We talk to your language, but no we understand your sermon." So, in this case, the example clear in appropriation gives variant normative gives language. Without that, necessarily, this cultural arbitrary would marginalize the culture of origin or the habitus linguistic of those students. This experience showed me the importance of creating practical proposals in the area of education that allow reversing the process of exclusion of the black population, carried out traditionally through the opposition of obstacles represented by elements of culture dominant what make difficult to access, from members of others groups of society, the A status full of citizenship. After completing the degree in pedagogy at USP, in 2011, and already working as a teacher of teaching fundamental, I did a master's degree in education at same university. At the same time, I created a program of extension courses, lectures and workshops, which I offering since 2008, on the civilizational values of Yoruba myths and their projection in the diaspora. The main works that I produced in this period, and that have been serving as a bibliographic resource for these activities, were the master's dissertation The Importance of Studying the Mythologies and Literary Genres of African and Afro-Brazilian Orality in the Educational Context Brasileiro, completed in 2014 and published under the title Pedagogia das Orixás Palia, 2015 Anthropology of the Orixás, the Yoruba Civilization from its Myths, Hierarchies and its Diaspora, first published in 2011 Palia, 2019 Blackpedia, The New Pedagogy of the Orixás Palia, 2016 and teaching material turned for the teaching fundamental, resulting from application. Practice, at the Mind Daily Teacher, of proposals what I presented at dissertation. In the first version of the book Anthropologia das Orixás, I presented a defense of the study of these myths, not in their religious function, but in their civilization concepts and values, as premises and guidelines of the policy coordination for traditional peoples and communities of African and territories. Matrix of the Secretariat of Policies for the Promotion of Racial Equality SEPPIR of the Presidency of the Republic. Professor and historian Silvani Euclinio, head of the Secretariat of Policies for Traditional Communities of SEPPIR from 2011 to 2015, to whom I sent an offshoot of my field research carried out in 2012 in shelters for the population of Rhode, Columbus and Terriros, gives Bayet, at conference state in Policies of Promotion Gives Equality Eshrito Santa CONEPIRES of 2013, gave me encouraging comments. In addition, furthermore, I was also praised by Minister Luzabeth Aros, who personally commented on excerpts from the report, defining it as extremely useful for the policies of SEPPIR which he headed from 2011 to 2014. In the context of Brazilian education, with the objective of contributing to the Law 10.639/03, which is strategic in the process of decolonizing our academic and educational thinking, as well as at the context of Rebirth African, developed this one job with O intention in collaborate, from the creation of new cultural bases through South-South dialogue, for the development of new relations social, political, economic and social among and in our countries. Recognizing my works as part of the African Renaissance, the leaders' African traditions that do so, enrich and attach a great value to this work in the historical moment through which we passed, in the first decades of the 21st century, and that calls for a restructuring in economic systems, politicians, social and world cultures. When speaking of rebirths of civilizations and peoples of the South, I cannot fail to mention that which, to me, is the precursor to all these, the 19th century Hindu Renaissance, led by Ramakrishna 1836 to 1886, but which took shape from the work of his disciple Swami Vivekananda 1863 to 1902, who spread the Vedanta tradition of Hinduism in Europe and America, and founded the order Ramakrishna at India. In the 19th century, Hinduism went through a crisis in which it was seen by its followers as being just a series of superstitions, thus moving away from its founding civilizational values, present in their scriptures, which gave rise to Hindu civilization. To the philosophers of the Renaissance, Hindus were assigned a role of rescuing these values, and with that they were responsible for creating a cultural environment that enabled India to enter the modern era and paved the way, in the 20th century XX, for intellectuals and leaders of movement in independence from India, as Mahatma Gandhi gives same form what a rebirth Hindu rescued values of Hinduism, a rebirth African he comes rescue you values civilizing of societies African, from of yours. Traditional communities and other regions of the South must promote their cultural renaissance, in accordance with the objective of political alignment of these peoples, in the context of the South-South dialogue in this new millennium. The African Renaissance, in this context, goes beyond a cultural project and has implications economic, policies and in inclusion social. However, so as it he gave with a rebirth Hindu in the 19th century, it begins with a cultural movement to rescue civilizing values of the traditional communities of African peoples, as well as their own valorization and that of their dynamics social. The African Renaissance also finds a parallel, in Brazil and in diaspora countries, Africa in Latin America, with the Latin American Renaissance, which defends the values civilizations of the traditional communities of our native peoples and, in our case, they work in together in the defense of both African civilizational values, which contributed to our formation in their lawsuit in resignification, how much indigenous, as heritage Brazilian culture. Thus, the objective of this work is to contribute with elements that help to establish new cultural relations for this process, recognizing the mythical basis of our African matrix, as well as like our black heroes, in the process of building our base archetypes in our education. The text of this new pedagogy of the Orisha combines theoretical reflections on education elaborated in my master's thesis, with the discussion about historical characters and mythical done at Baby Black Poly, 2014, 2016. Also account with a text in update, that forms the second part of the work and details examples of applications of the proposed practices pedagogical of identity affirmation and cultural Afro-descendant in living room and classroom. In the first part, I present essential concepts to understand the oppression exerted by the education system at the service of dominant classes or groups in a cultural formation, and to find strategies educational alternatives. For to start, the theory gives reproduction, the violence symbolic and Bourdieu's cultural arbitrariness. Next, the criticisms of sociological determinism derived from Bourdieu, made by Lahire and Charlotte, which highlight a role of the identity affirmation of the subjects within a society. Then, the foundations of the methodological proposal that I apply in my work, Winnicott's theory of transitionality and Byrne's space of creation. Finally, contemplating the specific case of education in Brazil, I comment on the legal basis for the inclusion of African and Afro-Brazilian history and culture in basic education, and the consequent proposal to use legends and narratives historical gives Africa and of Brazil, which it is detailed in Monday part of this constructions. In the second part, I described two pedagogical programs, the IRKO from the Escola Municipal and Eugenia dos Santos, from Salvador Ba and our parents, our true heroes, which constitutes my practice like teacher of teaching basic in our Paul. I offer also one collection of small texts, derived from African and Afro-descendant myths and historical narratives, adapted for use in the classroom, and reports of real experiences that can serve as topics of reflection for teachers about anti-racist practices. A detailing of Yoruba myths and oral literature to associated with them, so as not to repeat content widely discussed in the Anthropology of the Orisha Poly, 2019.